Welcome, everyone. The Board of Education convened at 6:30 in executive session for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's evaluation. I want to say that in absence of Ms. Megan Shields, our district clerk, the Board of Education appointed business manager Ms. Catherine Platt to serve as the Clerk Pro Tem for this meeting. Welcome, Catherine. Before we move on to the approval of the agenda, as many of you likely heard, Mr. Thomas Robertson, a former Haldane board member, education trustee, passed away on April 25th, 2023. I did not know Mr. Robertson. I was given a lovely overview of his life here in obituary. He gave tremendous years of service, not only to the district, but to the community. He was on the Board of Trustees for 6 years, from 1983 to 1989. He served as the Vice President of the Board of Education in 1988. And Mr. Robertson had 4 children attend the Haldane School District, along with 5 of his grandchildren. So very much a part of our community. And I ask that everyone present please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you so much. Moving on to the approval of the agenda, Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right. Welcome, everyone, to the annual district meeting, our budget vote, trustee election day. Thanks, everyone in our community who has cast their vote or is planning to cast their vote. If you're watching now, it's not too late to go out. Before the polls close, I wanted to say that your engagement and your active participation is what makes democracy work, both here at the school district and at large, so thank you all very much. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on June 6, 2023, 7 p.m. right here in the auditorium. I wanted to say that later on we'll be having a recess because we will likely finish our business here. We'll wait around till the polls close. I'll go downstairs, close them. We'll come up and wait until we get the results from the election today. So, Dr. Benante.
Thank you, Sean. And thank you to all our poll workers and support staff who've been a part of today's budget vote. A lot of work goes into it behind the scenes to ensure a smooth and fair process. I do want to acknowledge Mrs. Shields, who I know has been present all day at the polls, and also Ms. Platt for your help behind the scenes as well. We look forward to hearing the results in a couple of hours. We're at that time of the year where we have quite a bit of activity on campus. Perhaps you heard it just a moment ago. Something happened in a lacrosse game. I'm assuming positive for Haldane. Particularly recognizing recognitions and student performances. Congratulations to the students who were involved in the middle school production of Alice in Wonderland last week. And our elementary school and middle school concerts will be this week. Sectional play for athletics has begun or is soon to begin, depending on the sport. And next week's the Scholastic Achievement Dinner, where Ms. Sniffen and I have the great pleasure of taking our Valedictorian and Salutatorian to a regional recognition event with the other Vals and Sals from across the region. And I'm pleased with that to introduce Kate Bolte, who is our Salutatorian, to share an update from our high school and answer some questions for our board. So Kate's going to join us this month in lieu of our student government reps. Kate, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. So Kate, I know you have an update for us to provide, and then we might have a few questions for you along the way.
Yes, so I'd like to start off with some of the different activities as the year winds down that all the seniors are looking forward to. Right now, we have all the seniors are at senior internships that range from working as a flower farmer, which I myself am doing, to law offices, physical therapy centers, and different local government offices. And we'd like to thank Ms. Granisi for taking over the senior internship program this year. I'd also like to mention some of the other great events we have to look forward to. While our last official day of classes was May 12th, we will come back on June 8th for an end of the year celebration and whole school picnic, which we'd like to thank the PTA and school for their support in this annual event. And on June 1st, we have the opportunity to come together as a class with our parents and families for dinner and dessert at Villa Borghese in Wappingers. The class and parents are currently working on the Gift of Memories, so we'd like to thank them for that. And on Friday, June 9th, we have the junior and senior prom at West Point and pictures at Boscobel prior. It's not an open event to the community, but because of limited parking, it will be an option for students and their immediate families. On June 16th, we have our graduation rehearsal and walk through the elementary and middle school to say our last goodbyes and thank yous to all the teachers who have helped us through these 13 years. And graduation will take place on Saturday, June 17th at 10:30. If the weather's bad, it will take place either later on Saturday or Sunday morning. We're hoping, or we're not preparing for an indoor ceremony unless the weather decides to be bad for 2 days. And as a class, we've experienced most of our high school impact, which was impacted by COVID. While at times it resulted in us missing some annual traditions and academic experiences, we are grateful to the district for saving as many of the experiences as possible. When we talk to students from other schools, we realize how lucky we were to have even in-person and hybrid classes for as long as for as soon as we were able to. And I'd also like to take a second to thank all of the teachers and staff for their continued support through all the years at high school. Whether it was a talk with Mr. Houlihan that eased my worries about college, or Mr. Rosa comforted me in the office after receiving a bad calc test grade, there was never a lack of academic or emotional support in my time here. I think that I speak for the majority when I say that we couldn't have asked for a better high school experience, and we feel prepared to enter the world after graduation.
That's great, Kate. Thank you for your update. And Kate, what, if I can start, if that's
Please,
okay. The world after Haldane. So what does that look like for you? Where are you planning to attend next fall?
I'm planning to pursue aerospace engineering at the University at Buffalo.
Great school. Aerospace engineering. Got it. So, yeah, a couple questions on that, Kate. So share it with me. Was there a particular course that you took here or experience that you had here at Haldane that maybe influenced your thinking about pursuing that course of study?
AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, and AP Calc, definitely the experiences, even though they were harder classes, they really got me seriously interested in going into a field of engineering, and as I looked into it, the aerospace focus just interested me most.
Cool. And aerospace engineering, so we're talking spaceships. Yes, okay. Do you want to be in the space, do you want to fly the spaceship, or do you want to just work on, not just, but do you want to be constructing or building the spaceship?
More behind the scenes with working on helping construct.
Cool, cool stuff. I'll stop there. Yes, any other questions?
If you had to go back to your 8th grade self and either recommend something in high school or say something that you're going to have happen that will be great, what would you say to that person?
Honestly, lean on staff and teachers and just go out and make friends. Sometimes you really just have to think, what's the worst that can happen? Nobody's going to hate you for it. If you go out and do something stupid, nobody's going to remember in a month, even a month, let alone like 3 years. So just take the opportunities, make friends. You're only in high school once. And I wish I had taken advantage of like student or staff and faculty support sooner. I've gotten really close with a lot of teachers and faculty this year, and I just wish I had sooner.
Thank you. Cool.
I want to know a little bit about how you applied for, how you found your internship. I forget how long it is at this point.
So that we were actually provided an entire list. It's pages and pages long of different internships, or you could choose your own. And I knew I wanted to do something a little more relaxed after these 4 years, so I've always been interested in flower arrangement and everything, so I chose a flower farm and company.
That's great.
How was Mother's Day?
I did not start until after, but I just started today, but they said it was crazy.
Sure.
Way to go. I grew up with an aerospace engineer, so I won't put you on the spot of physics questions that I was grilled at when I was a kid. I want to just ask you about, if you look at your 4 years here in the high school, but your overall career at Haldane, what extracurricular opportunities have really we talked about the classes, but what has been something that has kind of spurned more creative thought for you?
Definitely when I decided to join the Haldane Drama Department. I am a light technician for that, and since I've been coming to the play since kindergarten, as the K through 12 campus gave me that opportunity, I've wanted to be behind the scenes. I always wanted to do stage crew, and with COVID, it kind of pushed my joining off a little, but junior year I joined, and since then I was able to join a great community, and it really spurred that creativity.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know I'll have the opportunity to see you next week at the Val Sal dinner and maybe a couple of times in between, but as a group, the majority of us will see you at commencement. We look forward to hearing your remarks at that point. Kate, you've done a fantastic job in your coursework and representing your student body in your time here. Congratulations again to you. You're a salutatorian. It's well earned. You've worked very hard to arrive at this particular place for you. Our community is incredibly proud of you. We look forward to celebrating you in the weeks ahead. Thanks again for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks, Kate. Just in closing, Sean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention just some provide some comments on yesterday's lockdown on campus. So as the school community is aware, yesterday at approximately 12:15 p.m., we did hear a concerning noise. It sounded like what could be reasonably believed to be gunfire in the neighborhood adjacent to the school. Deputy Tolvey happened to be outside at the time. It was at the time when recess was occurring for second and third graders. He called a lockdown, as he should have. The school was in a lockdown position for approximately a half hour. We went into hold-in place shortly thereafter. We came out of the hold-in place at approximately 1:35 p.m. We did have upwards of 50 law enforcement officers who were on campus yesterday. Reminder, when a lockdown call goes out, any available law enforcement officer will come to the campus. So we had multiple agencies represented, very professional, well facilitated, unfortunate position to be in, but both from the law enforcement officers who were involved and leadership that was involved, all the way through the staff who were involved, everybody did the right thing. And it's a disruptive incident, even though it wasn't the worst case scenario. It's still a very disruptive incident on our campus, to our students, to our staff, to our families. So we've been managing that for the greater part of the last day and a half now. I appreciate the many messages of support from our community that we've received. I would say please be sure to thank your child's classroom teacher and their aides and their TAs who were primarily responsible for supervising them and providing them with the reassurance that was necessary through that time. And it's something we're going to continue to monitor in the days and weeks ahead. It elicits all sorts of feelings and emotions, not just from our kids, but from our staff. We've encouraged our staff, please, if you need to take some space, and some of our staff have needed to over the next, days or weeks ahead, please do so. And obviously they have our full support in doing so. But we've learned a lot from it. I can say it's exposed some really strengths of our system, in our emergency response, but also some potential areas of vulnerability. And I'll just speak to them for a moment. We still, and I think some of these are things that were being accounted for in the campus master planning process, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say to the board, I feel a sense of responsibility to address some of these needs sooner if we can, because we just don't know when and if something could happen. And I'm talking about things where, we have doors that the locking mechanisms don't work appropriately. So, hey, and maybe a custodian knows how to get that door to lock appropriately, but that custodian may not be there in an emergency situation, right? And it's not something, a hurdle, if you will, that our staff should have to try to navigate in a real emergency response scenario. Locking mechanisms that maybe don't work correctly. There's some things that we can address in the short term, training, if you will, gaps in training that we're realizing may need to occur, and we'll do so. But Catherine Catherine and I are going to go ahead and meet with our district architects. We're going to invite them to do a more thorough assessment of the facility to address what those short-term needs are. We have some repair money, if you will, or money in our reserves, I should say, that we could direct towards addressing these things in the short term rather than waiting for a more comprehensive emergency response, or a capital improvement plan. And I really would like to be able to convey to our staff that I have the board's support in pursuing that and putting a plan together for your consideration and what will inevitably be the months ahead. You know, we're going to run into summer, but I see nods of heads. I think that's a message that our staff would bring them a sense of comfort just to know that we're taking it seriously. And we're going to address everything we can address when it comes to some of those safety measures that are a little bit more within our grasp, if you will, in the months ahead.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Benante.
Yeah.
for
And
that.
any questions?
Yeah,
obviously,
just a
then.
quick question. I remember that as part of the last bond, didn't we do a significant amount of safety work
We
and
did.
remediation as part of the last? So what was the gap between what was left undone?
Sure. So we had a particular figure in that last bond from
Yep.
2019 that we set as an arbitrary cap for us,
Okay.
I would say, and it was $2.3 million.
Yes.
So from a safety and security perspective, we included things like replacing camera systems on campus. We had some other window replacement, but that was, again, from a safety and security lens. Just to point to some of the gaps, we didn't do a full assessment of all of the doors in the district. And, we have now, there are a standard issue door that would be recommended with a window unit, if you will, that probably resembles the doors you see in here, if you will, but a classroom door as opposed to an auditorium door, where that window is a little bit more narrow, what you could actually see through if you were outside of the classroom. That's something I would ask the architects to now look to. Make sure the quality of the door is at a certain point.
Sorry to interrupt, but are you talking interior doors rather than
Yes.
exterior?
Yes.
Okay, all right, yeah.
I
I
We
remember
had some exterior doors replaced through that referendum.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay, all right. I remember we had that conversation about
Yep.
interior door
Interior
changes
doors
and
and we have a few doors now, even 4 years later, that just don't work correctly.
Okay.
That are interior versus
Okay,
exterior.
got it.
The exterior doors were a part of that.
Yeah, okay, got it. That's what I was-
Locking mechanisms
Yep.
on those doors is something that we should do a more thorough, comprehensive assessment of to make
Got
sure
it.
each door can lock correctly. So that's just two examples of things we would look for them to review for us.
Cool, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, I noted that we had a larger presence this morning on campus as well. Sheriff McConville was here, as well as Deputy Shelby and some of his associates, greeting and I think perhaps putting folks at ease as they arrived. So thank you for that. Moving on to communication from the public. This is on special presentations and agenda items. Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on any special presentations or active agenda items. We haven't had any special presentations, but there are some agenda items that we can discuss. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion of district personnel are strongly discouraged. Although we do not engage in dialogue, we are listening. Please leave your contact information with our district clerk, Pro Tem at this point, Ms. Catherine Platt, for prompt follow-up from the board president or superintendent. If anyone wants to speak now? No? All right. Then moving on to our information reports, starting with elementary school principal report. Ms. Jamin.
Good evening, everyone. I'll highlight just some work since yesterday. Today at recess, Ms. Curry and myself led some de-stressing activities to just help our students. After yesterday, we had heard from a number of parents in the evening that they were feeling apprehensive about recess today and just very nervous about that process. So we were able to set up a bubble station and chalk and give children a chance to sit with Miss Curry or myself and just talk about how they were feeling, or just sit and color and do those activities. And I would say a large number of our students participated. If you were voting today, you saw their artwork on our sidewalks. And it just gave them a chance to ease into what was a stressful day following yesterday's events. So I want to thank Ms. Curry for working with me on that. In my report, I highlighted some other social emotional work that we've been doing. So as we adopted or worked on adopting our math curricular resources that we presented on last time, that required a great deal of work from our faculty with math resources and a good chunk of time. And as we looked at that and thought about balancing the important work that our teachers do in the classroom with their students, but also then needing these chunks of time where they needed to be together to evaluate resources, get their hands on them, go through materials, and just be really prepared with the work. We made a plan to do two really important things. So while our teachers were able to be in those groups and training, we set up an alternative schedule for our students to attend an assembly, followed by 3 rotations of team building, social emotional work, and a reading activity that were led by other staff other than our homeroom teachers. So our students were able to do 2.5 hours of work in those areas while our teachers were able to focus on the professional development and curricular resources that they were using. So we were able to do that on 2 different days for our K through 5 faculty. We had some learning to do on how it was best to transition the kids between all of that when all of our teachers were somewhere else, and making sure that that happened efficiently and safely for our kids. But the second day we had all of that worked out. And it was just a really good use of time. We got good feedback from the students that the activities were meaningful to them and that they enjoyed the time working with their classmates. And then we got feedback from the staff that it was really valuable to be able to step into that work and not worry about lesson plans at the same time, but to know that their students were engaged in really good work while they could focus on what they needed to do. So I'm really thankful to our special area staff, our teaching assistants, and also our clinical staff who helped organize those activities and put them together for our students. We also had a number of our community artists volunteer to support Arts Alive once again and run that program for our 5th graders. And it was, again, an amazing event where our students got to engage in both artistic endeavors that they chose, but then also an endeavor that they maybe didn't put on their preferred list, but pushed their thinking or pushed them into an area of art that was new to them. So the students really enjoyed it, and it's the first of many 5th grade activities for this culminating year. They go to PNW BOCES on Friday for team building that we're looking forward to them enjoying.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Seelke is not joining this evening. She's excused. I don't know if Dr. Benante, you have any comments?
Congratulating our students again, but no, we can transition to Mrs. Sniffen.
Ms. Sniffen?
So before I begin my report, I can give a quick update on athletics. Our girls lacrosse team played their first ever home sectional match today, and unfortunately they did not win, but I think there's a lot to be proud of in terms of the growth of that program. Unfortunately, that screaming was just that our boys lost 10-9 to Briarcliff. It was their last regular season game, so it impacts seeding, but they're moving on to sectionals. And the good news is our baseball team won the first out of 3 against LaFell, 19-6. So the phone has been going and going and going with updates all evening. So some good news, some not great. So good news, but we move forward anyways. Obviously, there's a lot to celebrate within my report, a lot of names mentioned, a lot of recognition for students this time of year. So instead of just kind of going through that, I'd just like to take a minute. I know that Ms. Jamin just mentioned the lockdown and how that impacts everybody differently and how it impacts students differently. So we took a lot of time today, similarly up in the high school, checking in on staff, checking in on students, making sure that there were faces in front of the students to connect and ask questions and to talk through, and for them to share the things they were concerned about and some of those things that, you know, we forward on to other committees. But we were able to do that today, and we not planned based on the lockdown, but we had already planned on going into all of our junior classes. This time of year, we kind of start that transition as our seniors have now left and they're on their internships. We start talking about leadership. We start talking about empathy. We start talking about upstanders and bystanders, which are all things they've heard all the way through since elementary school. But as our juniors now become the leaders of a K-12 campus, what that means to all of us. So Kristen Amato and Scott Manny pushed into all of our junior classes today to talk through that. There were some really meaningful videos that were shared with our junior students, and I think that they felt open and free to talk about some of the mistakes they made when they were freshmen and trying to figure out who they were, and now going into their senior year, finding comfort and working towards supporting one another and each other's growth. So I want to thank Ms. Amato. I want to thank Mr. Manny for the time and energy they put into those presentations, into each of the classes. The only student I think on this list that I'd like to highlight is Helena Kottman. Was named a National Merit Scholar, and she is now moving forward. We will wait till the fall to see kind of how that plays out. If you remember, there's 50,000 students across the nation that are recognized based upon their PSAT scores, and Sophia Kottman has been recognized for doing well within the PSAT. So with that, we'll transition.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sniffen. All right. Moving on to Director of Pupil Personnel Services, Ms. Dr. Kashian.
Good evening. I did also want to just comment a little bit on the events of yesterday, particularly just how willing people were to help out. I was with Ms. Jamin when she made the call for any and all hands on deck, and people just came out of rooms and poured in, and it was really touching. No one thought about anything but how can we help and how can we support the kids. So it was a really good effort. In terms of highlighting my report, it's been really inspiring to be part of the hiring process. The procedures that are in place that I know Mr. Elder has been working on, the guidance that Dr. Benante has put forward, especially around looking for people who would really most closely match our core values, not just have the skill set, but also to be able to have the character that we're looking for, really help to frame our work. But then it was also really great to collaborate with the building principals, and I really was very impressed with the caliber of applicants that we got. So that too was something that leaves us with a lot to look forward to. So I know there are a few people being appointed tonight. I don't know, Dr. Benante, do you speak about them? Should I mention some of the?
I plan to speak about one of them tonight,
okay.
One who's in the audience.
Okay, great.
But if there's any others you'd like to speak about, you are welcome to.
Well,
just not the one
yeah.
who's in the audience.
They're not here tonight, but I can say that we're very happy to welcome Andy Simmons, who's going to come in as a leave replacement for us, the culture of the school right away. We also have a really new exciting hire for a speech and language pathologist position, as Deb Bailing is retiring, although she cannot be replaced. This new pathologist comes with a skill set that I think will be really helpful for the group of students that we have coming in that have pretty significant language needs. And then we have Ms. Nozamo Reed, who will be joining us at the high school, and she's both a certified English teacher and a special education teacher, and she has a background in teaching writing at Hunter, so we were very impressed with all of our candidates, so we're looking forward to them joining us. And then I'd also like to highlight we're having a parent information night coming up, and we now have a date, June 12th, for the new class that we're forming in partnership with the Garrison schools. So it's a special class. It's called the 1212, and it's going to be housed at Garrison, but it's going to be a collaborative effort between Garrison and Haldane. And so to that end, it's a really exciting adventure that we're on together, and they're about to appoint a new teacher to lead that program, I believe, at their June 6th Board of Education meeting. So again, just looking forward to this opportunity and expanding our inclusion.
I have a question about that in particular. I'm curious
Certainly.
to know about, is it a typical tuition situation? When you talk about collaboration, like how does collaboration different than like when we partner with another school?
That's a really good question. In a case like this, we collaboratively built the program, and we actually have an equal number of students in it. So I believe the superintendents got together and figured out a way to share the cost.
I see.
There will be some sharing of related services as well. So we foresee that, for example, our speech pathologist or our behaviorist may go over and give some support a couple of times a week, whereas their school psychologist may be providing the counseling. So we're going to divide up some of the related services also.
I see that.
And if I could just speak
Please do.
a little bit to that. First, I just want to thank Regina and Allison Emig, who's the principal at the Garrison School, for their efforts over the course of months now to bring the program or the constructs of the program together. Mr. Albano, their superintendent, shared a draft of what the contract would look like and how the shared cost structure would work, because it still has to be a formal agreement that the board reviews and approves on. Since they're hosting the program, that he's developed, or they have developed the draft of the shared cost structure. He shared that with me late last week. Our attorney's reviewing it, and I expect that to have that before you in the weeks ahead, certainly before the end of June.
I would just say, like, two points and a question, maybe. First, maybe this is a point, just for clarity for people who may be following along at home, this is a separate class from the new class that we are establishing here. So
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, great. Second, fantastic. The idea of shared services with Garrison is something that we've talked about for a long time, and it has been hard to do for many reasons. I think it's great, forging the path for hopefully other things to come. And third, I would just say, fantastic that you're getting such great candidates. And I would ask, what do you think is leading? Could you pick any, and I asked this of the new chemistry teacher, like why she applied here and all this sort of stuff. And one of her reasons was location, but also that we were ahead of the game in getting our position out there. But do you have any sense of why the candidate quality, why you're seeing good candidate quality?
A lot of them have referred to our reputation, honestly. They were like, well, it's Haldane. And there's like an element of, we've heard about Haldane, we've read about Haldane. So yes, it's beautiful. I mean, who wouldn't want to work in the Hudson Valley region and in Cold Spring? But Haldane itself has been something that people have said to me. And then they'll talk about some of the attributes, some of the fact that it is a small and caring community. But I think the academic program, they've referenced our website and some of the core values we have on the website, some emphasis on social emotional learning. That's what I've heard.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Kashian.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Elder?
Good evening, everybody. I think in rather just kind of updating on the hiring process, I think one of the things I'd like to highlight is kind of behind the scenes, given the amount of applicants, the new hires we have for this year as well as we have for last year, myself and my colleagues have used this opportunity to rethink our new teacher orientation program that we offer in August. Given the fact that this is a really good opportunity to orient new people to our values and kind of what we stand for, given the volume over the last couple of years, we recognize kind of the turnover and how we need to rethink that process for kind of acclimating new individuals into our organization that bring a wealth of experience and really good ideas, and at the same time maintaining some of those kind of core values or beliefs that we have within our district. And so my administrative colleagues and I have been spending a good amount of time in the last few weeks, and will continue to do so, of rethinking what that time looks like in August and what our activities are and really what we want to highlight in that really short amount of time. But I think what's really been nice about that has also been thinking about what that orientation looks like going into a school year. It just doesn't happen over a couple of days in the summer, but what that really looks like of supporting our new staff as they transition from where they have been to kind of their first year. And it's also been a really good collaboration with the Haldane Faculty Association, who runs their mentoring program. So there's been a lot of really good dialogue around this opportunity of our new hires. I would also say in conjunction with that, we are been thinking at a more of a systematic level about our professional development plan for next year. And those conversations at our Haldane Curriculum Council, along with our building administration, have been focused on examining what our district priorities are, building priorities, department, grade level and individual professional development needs are, and how we can best effectively maximize our current structures that we have to make sure that that happens, as well as our resources, but also be rethinking about what other structures we might want to consider in trying to think of our professional development plan as we go through that. So as we kind of wind down our year, I think there's a lot of back work that's going around about laying some plans for what next year looks like for a lot of our staff along the lines of professional development and teacher orientation. Lastly, I would just like to highlight, more selfishly, but I had the opportunity last Friday to accompany 6 middle school students and one of our high school seniors to the Garrison Youth Climate Summit, which was hosted by Garrison, and schools from Putnam Valley, Haldane, and O'Neill were represented by students and presenters. It was a great day that was filled with our middle school students being able to see a variety of different presentation activities. But I got to highlight, I think, our freshman, Sophia Kelly, just did an amazing presentation on invasive species and the importance of pollinator gardens. And she's a freshman, and we sent out if people were wanting to do so, and she kind of volunteered, and she just did a really amazing job. People were coming up to us afterwards asking some questions about her and her poise and just the way that she presented. And so that was really a really great moment to see people, our students, kind of get out in different environments and kind of present some of the work and knowledge that they have. It was really funny in the background. She was really nervous because she was like, well, what if they ask me some questions and stuff? I think she got really good advice around the idea of like, well, you're the expert, so just kind of talk through it a little bit. But she did a really great job with the students. And I just want to thank Mr. Wick, 6th grade science teacher, who helped accompany the students and kind of organize that end of it, Dr. Silke and Ms. Sniffen for their collaboration to make that happen.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. All right. Is Mr. Bauerlein here? I don't see him. All right. And Mr. Twardy, is Mr. Twardy here? I don't see Mr. Twardy either. Okay, great. All right, moving on to consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? No? All right, let me see here. These are our minutes from our last meeting, May 2nd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, moving on to consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? No? Please.
This comes up periodically, so I thought it might be useful. Maybe Catherine can talk about it. So every year we vote for a bus, or buses, or vehicles, and which is fantastic. And we're on a cycle, and we get reimbursement from BOCES and the way we do it. Question that came up is, we have a cycle. At the end of the cycle, we get a new bus, right? Do we ever? And I noticed on here that we're selling number 75 and number 76 as surplus to be sold to the highest bidder for scrap. So there is some residual value that we get back because we are on a, yes, and okay, all right. I remember seeing one driving through Nelsonville being pulled on a tow truck a couple of years ago, but so the process is basically, people were wondering where they go and what happens to them. Do you have any?
Sometimes if they're really worth nothing,
Yeah.
we do just get
Scrapped. Yeah, okay.
We do get value for it. It's not a lot, but we get that. If there is some life left in it, like the bus that we surplus, I don't remember if it was late last year or early this year, we did put it on a site called Auctions International, and it gets sold to the highest bidder, and it was an actual another school district that wanted to try to get a little bit of life out of it. I wish them luck with that.
There was a recommendation that somebody's going to buy one and turn it into a van and just live van life for the next 3 years. I'm like, probably not with the Haldane bus. Thank you.
Not with an Impala.
That's one of them.
Well, and I just
I
want
guess
to.
just putting a bid. Go ahead.
One of the things that's happened in the past number of years is it used to be that we kept our vehicles so long that they really were just available for scrap. And it was one of the things that Anne Dinio really worked on, was really trying to be a little bit more aggressive in that replacement cycle, so that we were getting more than just scrap value for the vehicles. And so, I mean, we spoke about this a little bit, I think mostly when we did the budget overview, but I mean, it's a well thought, people wonder like, why buses every year? Like, there's a real plan, there's a real need for them, there's a real justification, primarily keeping students safe and safe vehicles, but also really thinking about how to make it the most cost effective for the district. And so we really appreciate those efforts, yeah.
Yes, we do. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. right, moving on to consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? We have some folks in.
We do. First, I wanted to just acknowledge that Mr. Twardy, I'm recommending an extension to his term of service with us to the end of the year as interim. We just had caught that. That's something that will come up in an audit if we don't make the adjustment. And obviously, we plan to have Mike with us through June while we await the state list for the updated state list for the Director of Facilities position. Second to that, I did want to acknowledge before you vote that Katie Deasing is in the audience. Katie, if you wouldn't mind, could you just raise your hand? Yep, back there. Looks like you have some guests there too, Katie, with you. Katie will be joining our staff upon your approval as our 7th grade mathematics teacher next school year, replacing Miss Spratt, who is retiring, and we're very happy for Miss Spratt. And we'll have time to celebrate her later this school year. Katie is finishing her program at SUNY New Paltz, if I remember correctly, right, Katie? Yep, SUNY New Paltz. And I think through the interview process, which is pretty extensive, I think we've met with Katie 3 times or so along the way. There was a demonstration lesson, many conversations around her thoughts related to mathematics instruction. For our students, I was most impressed with Katie's professionalism, her knowledge base, which really is reflective not only of her course of study, but the quality of her fieldwork experience in a variety of settings leading up to this point. So we're very excited about the prospects of Katie joining us next school year as a 7th grade math teacher as part of our team, with your approval.
Great.
Oh yeah, I had a question on, noticed that the 7th grade English teacher is taking a FMLA leave, which is wonderful for her. Could you just talk a little bit about the process in terms of, will that be a leave replacement?
It will.
One person?
Yes, and our goal is to hire a certified English teacher for the duration of the leave. The position will be posted once the board approves the leave.
Great.
Thank you.
Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? All right.
Congratulations, Katie.
Welcome.
So Katie, I'm going to ask you a question. The question is, it's sort of following up on the question that I asked Regina, which is, I may know the answer. How did you come to hear about Haldane, and what drew you here?
Katie, why don't you
Come on up.
I mean, you're
Come
here.
on up.
We're in
You
it,
got
right?
the mic.
You've asked. There's been
Unorthodox. Out of order.
Little
Out of
did you
order.
know.
probably dozens of questions that you fielded along this way. Why not throw one more in the mix, Katie? Hello.
Hi, this is exciting. Definitely the reputation, like was said before, and also at Teacher Recruitment Day at New Paltz, I met Josh. Yeah, so I applied to Haldane because I saw it on OLAS, and I did that after I scheduled meetings for Teacher Recruitment Day, and I didn't realize that like Haldane was on there or something, I don't know, but I didn't have an appointment with Josh. And I show up and my friend Leah, who's going to be the chemistry teacher in the high school, was telling me about her interview with Haldane, and I was like, oh no, like I didn't schedule an appointment, but I was able to get a 10-minute interview in. And then I just went forward with the interview process, and everything worked out, and I loved it when I came, so I'm very excited.
Great.
So thank you.
Katie.
Thank
We're
you.
very excited to have you as part of our team. Go ahead.
Tell you right now that your 2 favorite students next year will be my son and Ezra's daughter. You will have both our kids.
No pressure there.
Can't wait to meet them.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah,
So anyway, we both have rising 7th graders, so next year.
great.
So we're looking forward to it. Yeah, absolutely. So welcome.
Katie, you're here with some family?
My boyfriend, Vinny.
Got it. So Vinny's here?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
If you have a few minutes, we're going to process through some items here. If you're able to stay, I know our board members would love to say hi and introduce themselves to you and to Vinny. If you have to go, we understand, but if you have the ability to hang around for a bit, we'd love to say hello when we recess.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Katie.
Okay.
Welcome. Thank you for coming up to the podium, even though it was unexpected. Wonderful job. That's right. I know.
right.
Of course. Of course. That's right. I know. All right. I guess we approved it. Okay, we were completely out of order there. Okay, good. All right. Moving on to board committee reports. Anything from the policy committee?
Just two things really, well, three things really quickly. I mean, we keep moving forward with the work. I'm actually hoping we get the new audited, policy manual at some point. But I actually very much expect to see some policy changes related to the workshop that I mentioned last time. So I did attend the NYSBA's policy workshop that focused on religion and education and provided some information about a recent Supreme Court decision in Kennedy versus Bremerton that will have some implications for policy, and it was just interesting in general. And then I'm also going to attend a session on June 7th. It's an open webinar, anybody can go, on district committees. So not really policy related in particular, but it's actually always a question I have about like district committees versus board committees versus, and so just making sure that we have all of our committee structure set up correctly is what that's focused on. So, and then we're meeting sometime in June. I think we're still trying to find a new time.
In June. Okay, great. All right. Moving on to unfinished business. This is the time for our elementary class size concern. Oh,
There may not be one, but.
there is no WPSBA update, so which is skipped. All right, great. All right. Unmentionable. Moving on to unfinished business. Dr. Benante?
Yeah, come up here. I did want to mention, just going back to not only Katie's hire, but Josh's attendance at the New Paltz job fair. So I know you spend a lot of time at an event like that, right, Mr. Elder? How many hours? 7 hours, but 2 candidates. So I feel like that's a pretty good return on that time. Sometimes you'd be there. And very high quality candidates that end up becoming part of our team at that job fair is great. And thanks to Josh for his attendance at those and representing our district and so well in those settings.
Just encourage the new teachers from New Paltz to continue their alumni work in reaching back out to other graduates of that program, because I've always found that to be a good, just in the corporate world, but that pipeline can be really
Absolutely.
really
It's
useful.
a great teacher preparation program. It's quite extensive, meaning many certifications, if you will, are offered at New Paltz. So yeah, keeping those connections are very important. Thank you, Mr. Hedlund. Okay, so I just have a few slides to ground us back in this conversation that we started at our last meeting that I wanted to share with the board. I'm going to skip over background. I think everybody knows how we've arrived at this particular point where we're discussing class sizes at first grade, which is really influenced by a shift that we have to make in sections to fifth grade because we have a larger cohort of fourth graders moving into fifth grade next year. So I just did want to share, this is an updated slide with our board, which represents some of the information I've shared with you already, but I did want to go further out in examining our enrollment study report, just so it may provide some additional perspective on not only where we are, but where we may be going. So if you look in the first set of columns there, that's the current school year, 22-23, our cohort size at each grade level, the number of sections we have at each of those grade levels, and then the average class size for 22-23. This is information, again, you've seen already. Looking at 23-24, and again, this is information that's been presented to you just somewhat differently, our anticipated cohort sizes. And you'll note I highlighted that first grade row. I'm anticipating that cohort size increases from 38 to 42. That's a reflection that typically us gaining 4 students between the end of the school year and the start of the school year, which I mentioned last meeting. I'm representing this still at 2 sections, so if nothing changes, because we will have moved a section down to 5th grade to have accounted for that larger 4th grade cohort now being in 5th grade. And you can see the average class sizes are listed there. Looking ahead to 24, 25, I just getting, again, a long-term view on this, I do think we will see in 24, 25 that in third grade, we will have 3 sections if nothing were to change. I asterisked it, highlighted it, because that's where we could condense down to 2 sections, if you will, and still be within those parameters that I discussed with you last meeting that the teachers and I had discussed as using as a guideline in future years. You'll see that cohort now following through to 25, 26 when they're in 4th grade, and then in 5th grade. I've showed it remaining at 3, but again, I would, in looking at this, just something I'm considering is that we're likely in 24, 25 to have the ability again to collapse a section, repurpose it, whatever it may be, in that year as well because of the size of that current first grade cohort now making its way through. Those parameters, if you will, broaden as they make their way up into the intermediate level. We are going to be able to consolidate a section potentially if nothing else were to change, or repurpose a section, if you will, for some other need in the building in those years as well. So I just want to demonstrate to the board, not only are we working on what's before us now, but I'm also thinking out a few years ahead to see if there's any anticipated adjustments we should begin planning for now in this work. And that's for not only the board, but also in my work with the faculty.
So just so I understand, so currently, what this reflects is no change. Am I too far away? Sorry. Currently, what this reflects is 2 sections for first, and agreed, we're going to talk about options.
Yep.
No. So 2 sections for first grade, that carrying through, with the realization that the current first grade,
correct,
would also potentially be given the class size sort of guidance that and alignment that you've achieved, is potentially currently 3, but could be 2.
correct.
Okay.
As they make their way into the intermediate level, which would I'd say grade 3 and beyond.
Yep. So, and just as a, we currently have 17 teachers K through 5.
Correct.
All right. So one of the possibilities for addressing first grade next year is to add a class.
Correct.
At which point we would be at 18 K through
Correct.
5. And what you're showing through 24, 25, 25, 26, and 26, 27 is the given alignment on class size numbers, there's the possibility to actually be at 16.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure I have that all in my head.
Or 17, depending on
Or 17.
where the outcome of
Whether or not
tonight's
you-
conversation, right, leads
Fine.
us. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep. And still be within our parameters, should nothing else change.
Correct.
Again, we look at this every
Yes.
year. This is based on our enrollment study. I think I've mentioned to the board before, I am going to propose to the board early next school year that we re-examine our enrollment study. Just that will
Yes.
help us for facilities planning.
Yep.
But it'll also help us with this, just to see if there's any shifts that have occurred at a county level, birth rates, whatnot, that we should begin planning for. But it's somewhat held, with the caveat that that current third grade cohort, fourth grade cohort was at one point 50 students or just around there, and now it's 60 because 10 third graders moved in last year.
Right.
So
Right.
things do happen, but
Right. Okay.
I don't want to cloud that discussion anymore. So just representing what's in front of us, I shared this with you last time. These are our projected students next year at each of those grade levels. At 17 sections, which is what we currently have, this is how we would align those sections. This was reflected on the previous chart. At 18 sections, we would potentially, if we were to add a teacher, we could add that to first grade. That would create class sizes moving from 21 to 14 in doing so. And just to bring this full circle from where we left off last time, we have small cohorts. We realize a broad range in class sizes. I shared with you some of the class sizes, and this doesn't just occur at the elementary level. At the middle and the high school level as well, our class sizes range quite significantly. And again, it's just kind of the nature of being a part of a small school district, but yet trying to still offer a range of opportunities for our secondary students. So we have secondary classes that are quite quite small. We have some that are large as well. Research does suggest that in some cases, and there's a lot of caveats to this, reducing class sizes may be an effective means of influencing student achievement, but it is not a given. I think as Peggy keenly noted, the most important factor when it comes to our students' educational experience is the quality of the teacher that is leading that classroom. We do typically experience 4 additional enrollees in grades 1 through the summer months as students are maybe transferring into or transitioning, if you will, from full day programs out of the district back into the district for first grade. We do see this as we do have a migration rate, is the term I was forgetting last time, that's accounted for in our enrollment study, and it's typically 4 students. Ms. Jamin had provided this information to me. It is consistent with what the enrollment study demonstrates or depicts. I've checked this out with the elementary staff on a few occasions over the last few months. As I alluded to, we agreed that the class size ranges of 18 to 20 at the primary and 20 to 22 at the intermediate were appropriate guidelines for which to strive. Guidelines, not hard and fast rules, if you will, and that's, I believe, understood between our administration and our classroom teachers. The topic of middle school most certainly has come up and is related to this. The teaming structure is something that we should revisit in the year ahead. Teaming, just so we're familiar with this, allows one teacher to specialize in content instruction. It was a core element of our middle school model when it was developed years ago. Those 4 core teachers, science, social studies, ELA, and math, share the cohort of students. If nothing were to change, and as we project out to the future, our class sizes at the middle school would remain very low, not just for our 6th grade cohort next year, but obviously as those students are processing through, and as we eventually have smaller cohorts of students making their way up. We do have some cohorts of 55 at the elementary school, but behind those cohorts, we're going to have sections in the 40s, which is going to mean that those class sizes in the middle school are going to be very low. Teaming is a supportive model. We're advocates for the middle school model and the teaming model there. We don't want to lose the essence of that. Our essential question internally is how do we maintain the best elements of teaming while effectively deploying our staff? And that's the administration's charge now looking forward at the middle school model and potential adjustments that we would recommend to be made there. More to come on that in the future. From a budget perspective, I had shared this with the board as follow-up to our last meeting. I did not present it I spoke to it a little bit, but not in a comprehensive manner, so I want to make sure I come back to this. We have several of the areas of our budget that we've re-examined over the last 2 months in working on this issue if we were to make an adjustment. We do have an additional 8th grade student who's tuitioning in next year. We estimate that tuition to be approximately $18,000. The rate, again, is set later, so it'll be around that amount. I went back through the BOCE service catalog. There's about $16,000 in BOCE services that we could cancel that would not have an impact on students. We re-examined our medical insurance. We could make some adjustments on the figures that we were projecting on that now, especially as we get further into the hiring process. I mentioned that we hired a chemistry teacher who was coming right out of program, which we did not expect to do. So we had budgeted there a bit of a buffer, thinking that we may have a teacher who had more years of experience that was applying. That's okay. The math professional development that's associated with the textbook purchase, we see some opportunity there just to readjust the work that we were going to do with the company to shift it to internal curriculum writing work, just given the exposure that our elementary teachers have had to the program and their ability, a few individuals in particular, ability to effectively lead professional development with our staff within that program. So we think that's just a win anyway. And then we can make a small adjustment to the elementary professional learning and literacy. We had buffered that a bit, but looking at that again, we can scale that back just by a day or two. And that helps us arrive at a figure that could support a couple of different options for us if the board recommends or would like me to continue to pursue this. Whether that be the hiring of an additional elementary teacher, we can hold this position as well, meaning we don't have to post right now. We can wait to see if we do indeed get those additional students in. We average 4. There's years where we don't have 4. We may only have 1. We may have 0. We may lose students. So, but typically we do average 4, so we can hold on that until the summer months when we're more clear on if additional enrollees occur. In the event that enrollment doesn't increase or increases much later in the summer where we're kind of beyond the hiring window or where we could get a quality candidate, we can move more quickly to hire additional aides or TAs to support those classrooms at first grade. As I've spoken to, we can move an elementary certified teacher who's in the middle school to the elementary school, but that would disrupt that middle school model. So I'm actually advising against doing this at this point, and we can make no changes. So those are really the options as I see them in front of us, and I think we'll pause there to see if there's any questions that I can answer or discussion. It's on for discussion for the board to discuss among themselves as well.
Well, I think it'd be good for us just to eliminate those options that we know we're not going to pursue to begin with.
Sure.
I think it's clear that we can make no changes as not something we intend to do, correct? Right? And moving an elementary certified teacher currently in the middle school to the elementary school, I think is highly unpreferred by the middle school and is not a recommendation that you made to us. So
it would
makes absolutely no sense for us
I wouldn't
to
recommend
suggest
that
it.
at this point. It would disrupt the middle school model. It would disrupt the 6th grade teaming, and I think that would now cause the parents or community members would come to be aware of that rather late and feel, and it's really not something that we've discussed openly with our families in any way, whether it be here or even outside of here. So I would advise against this. I do think the middle school model needs to be reconsidered, as I alluded to. That's a longer term prospect there and something I'd prefer to begin to engage our families around in the fall when we return to school.
I'll ask one more question here. And when considering option number 1 versus option number 2, either or both, you did show us a budget overview of what's available to us, but can you give us a sense of what the comparable cost for, say, option number 1 versus option number 2 is?
I'm going to say they're roughly the same, only in that it's difficult to predict benefits. So when we're hiring an employee, they may choose to access our health insurance, just as an example, or they may already have coverage. So that's a significant cost for us. It's about $25,000. So if we hire 2 TAs and they both access our want health insurance coverage or need health insurance coverage, that would drive the cost a bit higher, if you will. One may need it, one, so there could be, really a range there. But I think that figure of $95,000 covers salary and benefits for a teaching position, and would also cover salary and benefits for 2 TAs or aides who are accessing health insurance.
Right, and those
they may not.
And those 2 different scenarios, just to be clear, because there was some confusion in our last meeting, we're talking about hiring. In option number 1 is adding an elementary school teacher to the 5th grade cohort for 1 year only, correct? The other option is 2 TAs that would go in and provide support at the 1st grade level if we ended up with
Correct.
only 2
And I would
teachers.
just clarify that. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but
That's
it's
fine,
important to
I'm just-
distinguish. With the hiring of a teacher, first, we internally have our own processes
Correct.
for determine whether or not a teacher wants to shift to that 5th grade position. So I can't say with absolute certainty that we'd be hiring a teacher for
Great.
5th grade or
That's
for
good to
1st
know.
grade, because we may have a teacher who wants to move into one of those positions anyway.
Great.
We do that first. So I
Great.
can't exactly say where the hire would actually be, because we may have a
that's good.
3rd grade teacher who says, you
good
know
to
what, I want to teach 5th grade next year.
Great.
And then we would be hiring, somewhere else. So I just want to
That's great. That's great
that
to
there's
know.
staff movement
Yeah.
that can occur in any year that we're not, that's an internal process that's not finalized yet. So where the hire would be, I can't say with certainty today.
But we would be avoiding perhaps coercing and or suggesting that a teacher
Correct.
go to a grade that they currently do not have interest in doing
Yeah.
so. All right. Great. So questions? I know that we have different positions, points of view. I'd love to
Yeah,
hear about it.
I do have a question, and I'm not sure that you'll be able to answer this, but it might, Josh, you may be able to. What's potential retirement, teacher retirements in the next 3 years look like in the elementary building?
I'll speak, and Josh, if you have any additional information beyond what I have, we can anticipate. We can anticipate that there's at least one individual who will be eligible for retirement. Right. Our teachers don't have to, just to fill in the gap for folks who may not know, our teachers don't have to notify us until February 1st, Josh? I believe is the date.
Sure. But we always kind of have an internal clock.
Correct.
I got mine sticking, for sure.
At least one eligible. There may be a second.
Yeah.
Timing, a couple things. Is there a timing consideration for either, I noticed the word hold, and I think we had this conversation a little bit last, is like, better to be early. And I think this came through in the hiring that we've done for middle school and high school. It's like, be early, arguably get better candidates.
From a quality perspective, sooner the better.
Yeah.
Right? From a practical perspective, we've hired teachers as late as August before. Yeah. I would advise that we set a deadline of either late June, mid-July, somewhere in there, to say, look, that's our date to say we're assessing enrollment by that point in time.
Yep.
If we're using that figure, that number of 4 students potentially coming in, and have a point, whether it be the end of June or the middle of July, as that's when we're going to evaluate whether or not we need to hire somebody.
Yep.
Because it's crossed a particular threshold. I would use that as the deadline.
And any difference in whether you're hiring teaching assistants or teachers in terms of timeline?
I would turn to our principals more so than me in that, because they facilitate that process. Christine, in terms of quality, TAs or teacher aides, in terms of when to hire, I know it seems like we're always hiring in that regard. Do you have any perspective on that you wish to share? You just would have to come up, Christine.
You get your steps in. Sorry, Christine.
I think it's similar to other positions. Certainly, teacher assistants are certified as well, so they are applying for positions and looking for positions, versus aides are sometimes coming in from other career paths or looking at a variety of options, and maybe looking at some are coming from daycare opportunities or something like that, where I think we do get quality candidates throughout the year and on a rolling basis. But TAs, I would say, would follow a similar pattern to teachers in my experience.
Great. That's good to know. No questions? Anything? I think that what we're hoping to do here is to come to some sort of agreement about giving you guidance.
Yes.
I am inclined, and we can see how people feel, that I think setting a date, making it contingent is a good idea to get a sense of the enrollment. I'm inclined to want to defer to you and Principal Jamin about making the choice as to which is going to be more favorable ultimately as we move into next year, whether that's TAs or that's my position. So.
Yeah, the same. I mean, I think I spoke at length at the last meeting about, and Dr. Benante referred to it, what I thought were the factors really at play, and again spoke about, I think especially under these particular circumstances, right, of just how this has evolved, really, recognizing, wanting to make sure that there's adequate support for the first grade, so that those children experience, the high quality instructional, teaching and learning experiences that we know are possible here. I mean, that's certainly our goal. But how exactly to roll that out, I definitely defer to Dr. Benante and Ms. Jamin and Dr. Cation, too, like whoever needs to be part of that decision.
And I think I agree with that as well. We're not the ones in the classroom with these kids. We've made this point many times. Class sizes of 14 and 15 are insane, like in a good way, I would imagine, but it's extremely low. Extremely low. And I just, I guess it's going to be a discussion moving forward, right? If the projections are true and we're going to have these class sizes of 44 right on that cusp. I don't know. It's difficult.
Yeah, and I actually, I agree with Maggie. I mean, our teachers are very skilled, they're experienced, even if they're new, they have a lot of support. I have full confidence in our teachers' ability to handle class sizes of 18, 20, honestly, even larger classes. I mean, teachers around the United States teach classes that are much bigger than 18 or 20 students, and they do so really successfully. It's possible. And actually, I was even thinking about it after last time. Like, there's a lot that happens in an elementary school classroom that doesn't require small group instruction, right? There's morning meeting, there's specials, and there's also the part of being in a group and learning how to manage oneself, develop the social emotional skills that we really want our students to develop, and that's something that I would guess a class size of 20 kids that's well managed by a skilled teacher is more likely than in a smaller class size. So anyway, but for this next year, I know that this is where we are with options 1 and 2, and I'm comfortable with that.
I would add, as you know, I'm a teacher guy, so I'm going to always defer to option 1, though I do recognize, and I agree with Sean saying that, obviously, I think, I would defer to your expertise, but as a devil on your shoulder, or an angel, actually, I would suggest I am, thank you very much, that for me, the best option is the first one, and I say that from a long-term planning perspective, and I say that from a long-term budget perspective and a long-term planning perspective. So,
Can I ask? I just have a question.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
if we're talking about possibly needing to reduce the number of teachers, so I don't disagree with your wanting to go with option 1, but from a perspective of recognizing the need to possibly reduce the number of teachers and talking about long-term planning, can you explain to me how that's beneficial for long-term planning?
Yeah, so my suggestion is, if you look at returns coming back from the state, and at the federal level, just on tax dollars, and budget planning for 2 years ahead, it seems to be wise to be able to prepare for that for a very different budget year in 2025 and 2026. And so my suggestion is to plan accordingly now, and provide an opportunity that you can now for the 2023-2024 school year, recognizing that you may not have such flexibility in 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask that. I'm not sure how that works. I get what you're saying, but I'm not sure how that works, because 2 years from now, if we face this budget cliff, and we're not going to be able to increase, we're going to have issues no matter what. If we have a teacher in that spot, we're going to have to reduce headcount. So why does hiring somebody early now actually help us in 2 years when we're still going to have a revenue issue?
Because the point that I would say is that you're going to adjust your budgets according to meet, to have a teacher hire, and then you're going to not fill attrition positions.
Okay, fair. All right.
That's a heck of a lot easier, John.
True. Okay. All right. So I defer. I will defer. Okay. However, I will ask a series of clarifying questions. When I was thinking about this over the past 2 weeks, or however long it's been, it feels like forever, I was down the path of 2 teaching assistants for a couple reasons. One, it puts more teaching professionals per kid. That ratio gets better.
Correct.
3 professionals per the class, or 4 professionals. Right. Okay. 2, I think it builds back up the investment that we talked about having stripped away in previous years, right? 3, I think, but I would love to hear you, I think teaching assistants are more flexible. So we can deploy, the district can deploy them across a variety of grades and a different variety of instances. And 4, I think it begins to ladder you back up to the class size that we've now come to think about as what should be for, or a target for 3 through 6. Those were kind of the things that got me to that spot, but of the 2, I think additional help at that grade is, yes, let's be there, but I would love to hear sort of rebuttal.
I think, I agree with everything you said. Just coming back to something you shared about teaching assistants, we do have the ability to utilize teaching assistants and deploy them flexibly wherever we may see fit. My struggle with it is we're talking about, and this conversation is to address a very specific perceived issue that the redeployment of those teaching assistants, if that issue were to still persist at the first grade or kindergarten level, and we're using our teaching assistants to keep that ratio down, my ability or our ability to deploy them elsewhere in the district would be then limited. You are correct in that previous budget years, this was a support, the support of aides or teaching assistants was something that was reduced to avoid the situation of having to lay off a teacher. Unfortunately, it's one of those value-based decisions that or recommendations that I've made to the board that you've supported in previous budget cycles when we didn't have a windfall of money from the state. So, going back 4 or 5 years ago, I was recommending reducing aides and TAs to avoid reducing teachers. And as you know, the budget picture can really shift year to year. We've been in this unique period for the last 2 years that we never really had years like this where we've had a significant increase of aid from the state. I don't think we're going to continue to see that. And so we're going to be back to kind of where we were in previous years. From a sustainability perspective, I think that, and I just want to refer back to this chart, next year, we're talking about what we can do for next year. Beyond that, we're likely to be in the position again where we can reduce a section at the elementary, and it's going to likely be, in the absence of retirees, it may be the very person who we're hiring. I see, though, greater needs in the future in intervention and in special education. So my feeling is we could, and so we would be hiring in those areas in the future, most likely anyway. We can hire an elementary teacher to offset the class size in 23-24 for first grade, but we look for a candidate who also has either their reading certification or their special education certification, or now you're getting candidates with both. Correct. And be in a better position in 24-25 to redeploy them as an interventionist or as a special education teacher, unless there's a retiree and we're looking to do that in another way.
If we were to go to the option to spend the money on teaching assistants instead, is there any guarantee that they would stay in that classroom and that would be their assignment, or would they get pulled to cover a class without a substitute?
These are the realities that we end up facing when we're hiring aides and TAs, is that when there are absences or there's other, that we do end up pulling them. To provide support in other ways. And this was something I discussed with the small group that I had met with in one of those meetings I referred to earlier was, look, that's great. It's just not a consistent means of support that I've experienced as a classroom teacher. So yeah, that would help, but can you guarantee me you're not going to pull it? And I would say, no, I can't. Because Ms. Jamin has to do, first of all, it wouldn't be me, it would be Ms. Jamin. She has to deploy her staff who have that flexibility, which is your aides and TAs, in any given day to cover what needs to be covered. And that's her responsibility, and she does that well. And at times, if that means there's more aides available, that means I may have to, I have more options to cover areas that need to be covered at recess, or a student who has mandated services or support that's provided. Sometimes we have to pull our aides and TAs to cover those students as well. And that's a daily, weekly reality here.
And are we setting a precedent of class sizes of 14 and 15 moving forward?
No, I don't believe so, because I think what's most important in this conversation are the parameters that we've established with the elementary faculty. So if we were to go back about a month ago, I said, look, if there's one thing that's coming out of this conversation, it's agreement around the parameters that we're going to use as guidelines in the future. And we have that, and I think those are fair, and I think they're reflective of what the averages are in our region, and which is a very competitive region. And it doesn't mean it will always be 14, as you noted earlier, Maggie. We just have this kind of cohort size coming up that forces us, or where we've trended on the one side of it, which is to be lower as opposed to be just above it. I think if the fiscal picture were to change, right, as long as we're using this as a parameter, I can say to a staff, and we don't, we're in a difficult fiscal environment, I can say, look, we are using these as a parameter to the extent that we can. You've been accustomed to being on the low end of that parameter. So if it's 18 to 20, you've been at 14 because we've added the section in. But realistically, if we were to take the section away, if we need to, you're just above the high end of the parameter. You know, if you're at 21 or 22, the parameter is 20. And we've had years in the past where that's been our reality, and it may be in the future again. So our staff does need to have a level of readiness and understanding that if it's a difficult fiscal environment, that we may need to go on the high end of that parameter or just above it. That's why I say it's not a hard and fast rule. It can't be, because when it comes to budget development, we have to be in a position where we need that flexibility, and we've had years like that. So, and our staff has experienced that as well. I think they understand that. Let's hope it doesn't happen, but I think they understand that that's a reality that we're going to be facing.
We currently have 17 teachers K through 5.
Correct.
And you're talking about future needs in interventionist special education. What's the size of that teacher cohort?
Does
that make
I don't know if I
doesn't make
understand the
sense?
question.
Okay.
Change your overall number.
Well, no. So we have 17 in this bucket, which is
How many interventionists do we have?
how many like intervention the
Sure.
alternative we're going to hire somebody for K K through 5 certified, but also going to be dual certified to be special ed or interventionist. How many people do we currently have in?
We have 2 interventionists at the elementary school.
Okay, but you perceive the need in the future for an additional one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that we can provide a more comprehensive intervention model. We have areas of intervention at the elementary school that we're currently, we're imbalanced, if you will.
Okay.
If you think of intervention being primarily delivered in the area of ELA and mathematics, we are skewed to ELA. We offer very little intervention in mathematics. So that's an area, that's a gap at that school.
Okay. All right, that's fair. Thank you.
And the one thing I'd like to say about class sizes is we talk about having these sort of parameters that we're talking about. I mean, when you're talking about one of these classes is our co-taught class, so you're going to have a fluctuation in the needs of those students. And I think it's important for us to consider that we still need to have the flexibility so that the student profile is centered, so that we don't arbitrarily say, no, it's 20, I'm not interested in the widgets.
Right.
It's 20 human beings, not 20. So. All right, great. So I think we've all had our say about that.
Yeah, so just for clarity, I know there's vested interest, people who may be watching at home, and I want to make sure I'm thorough in my communication. I'm likely, just give me the night, it's been a busy week, but to notify our families of the issue, because I think some have spoken here, and make sure that they're aware that this has been discussed with the board, and that we're in a position to hire a teacher for the first grade class, or wherever it may be at the elementary. I'll have to just sit with that a little bit for next school year. Our focus is going to be on hiring a teacher that is dual certified, so we have flexibility in the years ahead to repurpose that teacher in other areas of need in the years to follow.
Great. So no action to take.
What was your last statement that you just said earlier about the parameters? I'm sorry, I missed
I
it.
said that arbitrary numbers, they're just arbitrary numbers, that student profiles at the end of the day are going to have an impact on the size of any particular class, because we don't have we do not have a separate class for students who are receiving special education. We only have a co-taught model. So if those classes start to get too large and we're not taking the profiles into consideration, then it's arbitrary. That's all I mean to say about it. So. Do you disagree?
Nope.
Great.
Nope, good.
Great. All right, moving on to CPSE Recommendations. Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, our next order of business is going to be the acceptance of the results of the annual district meeting, budget vote, trustee vote. I don't have to take the trip. I've been told that Megan has closed the polls without me, so, what's that?
It's okay.
It's okay.
We're just admiring the timing.
Oh, that's right, I know, perfect timing, I really got that one go. So, in the meantime, let's recess and move that we recess until the results are in. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's call this meeting back into session. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful. Any opposed? No? Great. I guess I just call up Travis to come up here and share with us the results.
The following are the results of the annual district meeting of May 16th, 2023. Proposition 1, the school budget passed with 449 yes votes and 67 no votes. Proposition 2, school vehicles passed with 440 votes and 75 no votes. In the trustee election, Margaret Peggy Clements received 456 votes. The total number of write-in votes was 13. Thereby, Margaret Peggy Clements will assume the open trustee position on the Haldane Board of Education commencing July 1st, 2023.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Ms. Trustee Clements. And thank you so much, Travis. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone who put the budget together and has worked so hard to make sure we got the word out, that we get the support that we did. Moving on to the acceptance of the results, Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby accepts the results of the annual district meeting, budget vote, and trustee vote for Tuesday, May 16th, 2023, as indicated.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and this is just a regular consent agenda. We don't. Yes. Okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right. Just for the one. All right. And I guess that's official. We've done it, right? Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Moving on to communication from the public. Anyone want to come up and speak? I'm not going to read the paragraph again. No? All right. Board reflections.
Middle school play, phenomenal. Primarily because of the progeny of the board members, I would just say.
Agreed, yes.
The Foley Headlands and the Clemensons were well represented in the cast.
Great.
And I think that was it. Okay, all right. I was thinking stage
There
crew
was
or
no one else in the show.
something. I mean, no. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's right.
And I want to say thanks again to Dr. Benante and Catherine. I mean, that is a phenomenal budget vote. I don't think it's ever been that positive. I mean, really phenomenal. I think it really goes to speak to the extent to which the budget really addresses issues that the community thinks are really important, as well as the clarity with which those issues were presented repeatedly over the meetings. I mean, I know it's so much work, but it was really, clearly very successful, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, and I want to apologize for speaking with more force than I intended to you, Trustee Valentine. Okay, Dr. Benante.
So yes, overwhelmingly positive results. Congratulations, Peggy.
Thank you.
I want to, continues to be a pleasure to work with you as a trustee on the board in another 3 years.
Another 3
That's great.
years, yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just wanted to acknowledge the School Foundation, our PTA, our Arts Alliance, our Blue Devil Boosters, for all of their support. We started with them, months ago, just talking in great detail about what was included in the budget, and I know that they've played a large role in helping get out the vote. I acknowledged our poll workers and the individuals like Travis and Abigail and others who are upstairs helping out with Ms. Shields throughout the day. And again, just want to acknowledge and thank them for all the support that they play in facilitating a smooth vote. And lastly, I do just want to acknowledge Ms. Platt, who has worked quite diligently, stepping into a very big role for our school district on a very short timeline and coming to familiarize herself with all the elements of school budgeting. And she's been a great partner in this work, a quick study, and she models in so many ways. So when we talk about values of the hires that we've brought on, Catherine has quietly just facilitated a very smooth and thorough budget development process with our leadership team, her first one. So a good base now in which to work from. So congratulations to you, Catherine. You really deserve it. And that concludes, yes, please. Those conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Shall we adjourn the meeting? May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you so much.